What's up, guys? It's the Flamed Applesauce here, and we're back once again with another video. And I'm really bad at intros, and I'm very bad at intros, and I'm very bad at intros. So, anyways, today is March 6th, 1981. The streets are filled with celebration about the Eurovision Song Contest. You walk up to the courthouse and go in. You stand in line, waiting to go through the metal detector. You empty the contents of your pockets, stepping through the detector. Nothing happens. The officers hand your items back, and you head to the courtroom. It is now the third day of the trial. And suddenly, as court is mid-session, a familiar face pops up from the crowd, and the woman draws a gun. She shoots the butcher who is on trial 6 times in the back, out of the 7. The woman is apprehended, and court is dismissed. My name is the Flamed Applesauce. Welcome to the Marianne Bachmeier case. Now, I know I've got a gross background. I'm doing the best I can. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3rd, 1950. She grew up in Sarstedt, a small town near Hildesheim, Lower Saxony, West Germany. Her parents had fled here because during the aftermath of World War II was an event known as the Fight and Expulsion of Germans, which took place in 1944 to 1950. In which Germans and Volksdeutsche, which were Germans who had German origins but didn't hold the citizenship, fled and were exiled from various Eastern and Central European countries, including Czechoslovakia and the former German provinces of Lower and Upper Silesia, as well as East Prussia, which is where her parents had resided at the time. Bachmeier was raised in a conservative home with devoutly religious parents. Her father was previously a member of the Waffen SS, which, for those of you who don't know, that is a Nazi officer. He was the stereotypical authoritative figure. He drank heavily and spent much of his time in a bar close to the family home. Their household was abusive. Her father drank all the time, which I think is most likely, him battling the psychological effects of World War II. Because, believe it or not, a lot of the German people were conned into joining. It wasn't necessarily they believed in what H-Man was saying. They were just like, this guy's convincing. He seems to be one has the best interests of Germany all around. He's got a, minor flaw. But a lot of them really genuinely didn't want to fight. And once they went home, they had all sorts of PTSD and all these other problems, just like our troops. Like, it's sometimes it's hard to remember that just because they were the bad guys, the enemy fighting force of a war is not always necessarily the bad guys. Like, I'm not going to semantic it, whatever. But could you imagine having a, Nazi officer be your father? Like, you mess up, and then you just get the shit beat out of you because, you didn't wash the dishes right, or you were thinking too loud. But anyways, her parents divorced, and her mother later remarried. Bachmeier was perceived as a troubled adolescent by what she described as a dictatorial stepfather, and her mother eventually kicked her out of the house. After Bachmeier was kicked out of her home, she got pregnant at 16 and she gave up the baby for adoption. At 18, the same thing happened. However, she was also shortly before giving birth. Now, sadly, I don't believe that she had the children long enough. I couldn't find anything that said she had them long enough to even name the children. It was just she had them and immediately went to adoption. Eventually, she got a job at a pub named Tipasa and eventually formed a relationship with the pub's owner. Now at 22 years old, she was pregnant, and for the third and final time, Later in the year, Anna Bachmeier was born. She was raised alone, and I can't tell if she still worked with the owner of the bar. I'm assuming she did because the guy runs the bar. So it's weird that he didn't help her. He didn't offer financial help. He didn't do anything. At least that's not why I didn't find anything. So that begs the question, why didn't he help with the baby? It doesn't make any sense. Due to this, Marianne would bring little Anna to the pub, and she would hang out and play there while her mother worked. This led to Marianne reportedly feeling like she didn't really need to go home after she was done working. So, like, you go to work and you bring your kid with you, and, some people can't afford daycare, so you bring your kid with you to work, and they're just playing off in the corner, doing whatever, in a bar where, you're serving alcohol, and there's a potentially dangerous environment. But, is what it is. Now, I looked, and I couldn't find too much on the background of Klaus Grabowski, but he did have a little bit. He worked as a butcher. He was 35 at the time of the incident, and a small but intense list of crimes, which are: in 1973, he received 1 year probation for strangling a 6-year-old girl. So, this is a butcher. He's a big German butcher. He probably has hands like Wreck-It Ralph or like Paul Bunyan or some shit. And he just, got him wrapped around this girl's throat. It's like, Jesus Christ. He only got 1 year of probation for it. Then, 2 years later, he would be sentenced to 1 year in a psychiatric hospital for both a 9-year-old boy and girl. Now we have 2 cases. We have 1 and 2, and the second one is worse than the first. But, at this point in time, it's clear that he has a history and a preference. Now, the entire Marianne case, the entire events of this whole thing happening, the events that my video was on, could have been avoided. Should be killed. 100%. Like, there's people argue for castration, but there's, some outside forces. Files should just be executed, essentially. There's really not too much you can do to fix the files. It's a lot of people bring up, they're like, you can castrate them, but later on I've got a little bit of details that say that that's not the best thing to do. People change, people say. No, don't change. They put up a facade, and they still look and fantasize at the children who are walking around. According to Esfandi Law Group, 30 to 40% of people reoffend after 15 to 20 years. Which, 15 to 20 years is a long time, but you have to look at it this way. Each percent of that 30 to 40 is another child. Each percent is potentially 1 or more children, because 30 to 40% is just of what they found. There are, it says, according to the Connecticut General Assembly, the range of reoffenders is 10 to 50%. So once again, we're hitting that 30 to 40% range. It's still that 15 to 20 years. I couldn't find what the control group was, but if that control group is more than 100 people, then that means each and every single one of those percents is more than 1 child. So that's just like if they reoffended. So that doesn't include how many they reoffended with. It doesn't include each percent being more than 1 child. And even it being just 1 child is inhumane. It's another child that had to experience the worst of what humanity has to offer them. But anyways, to put it into perspective of the 10 to 50%, if someone is a convicted pedophile, you flip a coin. Flip a coin. Like, take out a quarter, flip a coin. It's a heads or tails difference of whether or not they're going to reoffend. I don't understand why we give mercy to pedophiles. They don't deserve it. They have... I've said it so many times before, but really the only thing you can do is, put them down so then they can't reoffend. Rant over. I just get a little heated when talking about the subject. Klaus voluntarily had himself chemically castrated. He conned a urologist to give him hormones to re-up his sex drive and capabilities. The excuse he used as to why he was castrated was he was convicted of exhibitionism, which, to save you a Google search, means sexual things in public, essentially. So there's why you can't just castrate them, because, you just go do whatever. I mean, chemically castrate, maybe a physical castration might be something, but even then, they're. Now that we have the background of our historical figures and a bonus personal rant, we can dig into the main bits. May 5th, Marianne is getting her daughter Anna ready for school. The two, while getting ready, get into an argument. After fighting, the two go their separate ways, Marianne going to work, and Anna, feeling upset, decided to skip school to go see a friend to make her feel better. On her way to her friend's house, Anna encounters the butcher. To Anna, he was a kind man who often let Anna come over and play with his cats. Today was no different. On her way to her friend's house, she stopped by his apartment because Klaus offered for her to play with his cats for a minute. She went inside, and Klaus's desire got the best of him. For several hours, unspeakable things happened to Anna, and when the monster was finished, he strangled her with his fiance's leggings. This guy he was pretty popular at his butcher shop. He was essentially a family man. He had his own family. He had his wife, or his fiance, and he had a woman that liked him. And I don't understand how he could keep being a pedophile a secret. It just really doesn't make any sense to me. Excuse me. But anyways, to round it off, he packaged Anna's body up like he would a piece of meat from work. He put it into a box and left it on the shore of a canal. His fiancée turned him in immediately once she had learned what he had done. During the trial, when asked why he committed the crimes, he reported that he was going to let her go, but she was going to tell her mom and try to extort money from him, causing Klaus to become enraged and strangled her with the aforementioned leggings. Now we arrive to the main attraction. The reason you are here. On day 3 of the trial for Klaus, Marianne Bachmeier entered the courtroom, got into the stance of a deliberate and surgical intent, and fired off 7 shots out of her Beretta 70, which had the lowest round count the model could have, as well as the Beretta 70 being generally regarded as not being powerful enough to be used for personal defense. However, if it was chambered in 38 ACP, then it could be a possibility, so I'm thinking that might be what she had. Which, a fun little fact, the Israeli Mossad issued a 70 and 71 variant chambered in 22 to their agents. This was all provided to the gun wiki. Thank you. Of the 7 shots fired, 6 connected with Klaus's back, killing him instantly. There's a recreation of the event. I'm sure we've all seen it. It's the video that, led me to this case. Which is, here you go. But as stated before, this is just a recreation, and several different news outlets and reporters and events have used it, declaring it was the actual event. Which, funnily enough, in the video, you can clearly hear 10 shots, as well as maybe possibly an 11th covered by music, but you can see her flinch. And the biggest mag size for that gun is 10 rounds. Once she had finished firing, she calmly lowered her weapon and was detained, as well as admitted into custody. After she killed our subhuman garbage, she obviously went to trial herself. Bachmeier sold her life story for about 100,000 Deutsche Marks to the news magazine Stern. With the fee, she covered her legal costs, and everyone across mountains and oceans had heard about her story and sent her support. The story that Stern had put out had details that didn't paint Marianne in the best light. For example, just like Bachmeier and Plochet, I had only known that she killed the man who defiled her daughter like a badass. I have to preface, I phrased it very terribly. He was not a badass for defiling her daughter. She was the badass for killing him because of it. I just needed to clear that up. But like all stories in real life, it isn't that exciting, straightforward, and it's most of the time just simply sad. One of the details that was published was the fact that Marianne realized her lifestyle was toxic for a child, and she ended up wanting to put Anna up for adoption. So she still has like that internet, Hall of Fame of like, you're just scrolling through iFunny randomly in 2015 or whenever, whenever it was funny, and you come across this case of this mother who shot her child's abuser, and you're like, holy shit, that's the coolest thing ever, what a badass. Or you see a man hop in a bulldozer and tear down a town because they wronged him, or you see, one of those. And it just kind of like, as a young child, I put these stories on a pedestal, like the stories of the events and the people in them. And as I'm doing these videos, I'm slowly realizing, it's not a comic strip. It's not a movie. It's real life. These are real people. They are, most of the time, ordinary people. They have flaws. So, anyways, don't worry. I'll forget that every time. I'll be like, oh, I remember this one. What a badass. And then I'll look into it, and then they'll be like, yeah, so they were really just kind of a shitty person in the background. But even then, you got to look at it like these are just normal people. Anyways, on November 2nd, 1982, Bachmeier was initially charged in court with murder. Later, the prosecution dropped the murder charge. After 28 days of negotiations, the board agreed on the verdict. 4 months after the opening of proceedings, she was convicted on the March 2nd, 1983 by the Circuit Court Chamber of the District Court of Lubeck for manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm. So, it's not awful. Something interesting to know about German gun laws. German people can own a firearm, which I thought was not allowed. But they have to have a specific, license from the government that states they have a legal reason to have the firearm, which is kind of dumb, but, like over here, I haven't bought a weapon myself, but I plan to. So, I do know that you have to pass a background check. They look in to see if you committed any crimes, and if you didn't, then you're pretty much good to go. At least I think so. Once again, I'm not stating anything for a fact, I'm not for sure, but that's kind of roughly how it works over here. Now in Germany, bodyguards, they have to do a special thing. They have to apply to the government, they get a loan, whatever, and so that's how they have it. That's why she has unlawful possession of a firearm. The defense's argument that the act was not premeditated, was mostly upheld by the court. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but was released after serving 3. So after the case and her punishment, she had several interviews and documentaries made about her. After that, she ended up marrying a teacher, and the two of them moved to Lagos in Nigeria. The two divorced, and she was eventually diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and returned to Germany, passing peacefully on September 17, 1966, at 46 years old. Now, we've reached the end of the video, and I believe that Marianne's punishment was too extreme. With Gary Plauché doing roughly the same thing, he never saw the inside of a prison. Marianne should have never been incarcerated. She was a mother who was quoted to shooting Grabowski after careful consideration to enforce the law on him and to prevent him from further spreading lies about Anna, which I believe is the proper way to deal with it. Execution in essentially any way possible. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times in these videos. Should be put down. Plain and simple. Now on the case, I still hold Marianne in a high regard. And, Gary and Marvin have dropped in my mind ranking of, these guys aren't the legendary, invulnerable figures that I remember them to be. They are, regular people. I can happily say that this one, she didn't really change much. I mean, yeah, she's got some history. She, did what was best for her. And potentially what was best for those children that she gave up for adoption because she could not afford to support them So why would she, force them to be in that situation? But all in all, Marianne Bachmeier was a victim of circumstance. She wasn't the greatest mom, but she tried her best, and she did what she felt was best for her and her children. So, to round it off, I believe she was just a mother getting her due justice, avenging not only her daughter, but also the 3 other children assaulted by this garbage, and possibly the more that he would have probably hurt. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. It means a lot to me if you've stayed this long. It means a lot to me for you just clicking on the video at all, even the people who stay for like 30 seconds. It makes me, it really, I'm very thankful for it. Anyways, I'd like to thank you all for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you enjoyed it even more, subscribe. It really helps me out, lets me grow, and maybe recommend me to a friend. I will see you in the next one. Peace and chicken grease.